Hey, welcome to week 3 of Explore the Bible. Today we're continuing our pathway through the book of Romans. As we kind of look at these passages, you'll notice that we're really sharing the gospel. We're talking about the gospel message because the book of Romans is the testimony of the gospel. It's the theological underpinnings of all of what the gospel is. And so Paul's going in depth, and you'll notice that week builds upon week, builds upon week. And so today we're in chapter 2, and as we look at this, Paul is taking on the idea that just keep the law. If you can keep the law, then you're going to make it. You're going to be all right. And Paul takes down that idea very strongly here in Romans chapter 2. The first verse or passage we're going to look at, verse 17 to 19, he says, if you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law, this key phrase, you are relying on the law. You're boasting in God, but you're relying on the law. And you know His will, and you prove the things that are superior because you've been instructed by the law. And if you're convinced that you're a guide for the blind, you're a light to those in darkness, you know, you're the instructor of the ignorant. You're the one that you know it all. You've got it all down. The Jewish idea that we have studied and we're the chosen ones, and that because of how we live and what we do, we're the ones you all need to listen to because we're really better than you are. It was that Paul takes on that idea. He says, you know, if you're relying on the law, then what you're doing is you're trying to show how worthy you are to God. You're trying to give example. God, you know, I'm worthy of salvation. I've earned this. I've earned your favor because look at how I've lived my life. I deserve some special recognition here. It's really a false claim. It's based on this really very untrue, inaccurate view of myself where I think that I'm better than I really am, that I'm holier than I actually am, that my measure of righteousness, personal self-righteousness is so great, God would be happy to have me. Well, boy, that's just certainly not the case, is it? You know, the problem is that what we do is we measure ourselves against other people instead of against God's law. And see, when I measure myself against other people, inevitably I can find somebody that I'm better than. But if I measure myself against God and God's standard for me, what I find is that I fall woefully short. No matter how good I may think I am, I don't reach that measure that He requires of me. I am not a perfect person. And so he says at the end of this passage in verse 23 and 24, you who boast in the law, do you dishonor God by breaking the law? For as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. And boy, here's the ugly reality, isn't it? That even when we measure ourselves against other people know that we fall woefully short. They see our shortcomings. They see our weakness. They see that, and certainly God does. God sees every sin. God knows. We boast in the law, but we have broken the law. We haven't kept the law completely. That other people, they see us as we truly are. They know the reality. And so if we pretend that we have some kind of special holiness because of our special relationship to God, that we think we've got history, we've got knowledge, we've got, education in what God wants, we think that gives us some kind of a special role. Other people see that fakeness in us. They know that that's not real. So don't fool yourself in that. Don't fool yourself in thinking that you've got something that's just not there, that you have some achievement of holiness that is not reality. Verse 27 of chapter 2, he says, a man who is physically uncircumcised, but who keeps the law, will judge you who are a lawbreaker, in spite of having the letter of the law and circumcision. Here he takes this one particular thing of circumcision that many would hold up and say, well, we're the circumcised and you're the uncircumcised, and as if they had some role in that. You know, that happened when you were a little boy. You didn't have anything to do with that, but as though that gives me some kind of a special place before God. And he says, look, if a person is not circumcised, but they're keeping the law, they're in a better position. They're in a better place. That perfection is the measure here, and keeping all of this law is not, you're not able to do it, but a person who kept all that law, but if they hadn't been circumcised, well, they're in a better position than you are, even if you've been circumcised. But the reality is that it doesn't help anybody. You know, it's not going to get us where we want to go or where we think maybe we already are. So he says this in verse 29, on the contrary, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is of the heart. It's of the heart, by the Spirit, not the letter. That person's praise is not from people, but from God. Now, there are some really key phrases here that we need to grab hold of. The first thing is he says, you are a Jew who's one inwardly. That is, there is an inwardness here, not the outward, the appearance, the show, the actions, but the inward heart. That's the circumcision of the heart. This is the introduction of faith, which the next chapter, chapter 3, is going to go deep into faith. It's going to start going deep down that road, but he's introducing that idea that you can't just say, well, I have done this, and I've done this, and I've done this. God, you need to be happy with me, and God will accept me because of all the things I've done. Because the reality is that even if we have done a lot of good things, we all have this sin. He'll talk about that also in the next chapter. And it is the heart that God's looking at ultimately. It is the love and faith and obedience. That's it. Not the outward shows of cultural Christianity, you know, these things that we think. I think it's almost like in Christianity, it's like our Jewish circumcision. We look at, well, do you say the right things? Do you dress the right way? Do you listen to the right music? Does your radio in your car on the right channel? You know, these kinds of things. Are you listening to the right podcast? Are you doing all of these things? Do you look right? Do you act right? Do you seem to be Christian? Well, it doesn't matter if your heart is not where God wants you to be, if it's not faith, if it's not trusting in Him, if it's not love and obedience of God. This cultural Christianity does you no good. It doesn't help in any way. And too many times we measure people by those outward things that we see. We look at those outward things, and that's where we judge a person's Christianity based on those things. And part of what Paul is saying here is you can't know that. God knows that. But you can't know that. And really the truth is you can't know it about yourself. You can't know it about yourself. Even though the church may accept all those things, even though other, saintly Christian people may look at all those things and think you've got it together, the truth is that what's going on inwardly, this is it, the Spirit, not the letter, right? The Spirit. What is your walk with God like? And do not measure your walk with God based on the number of boxes you can check off that I've done this and this and this and this. It's a very different measure. Faith is a very different measure. And this is the challenge in some ways, because we like those things where we can measure, right? We like to be able to look at things and go, well, that's good, that's bad, right? You did this, you did that. But that is not Christianity. And those things, when we settle for that, I really like this idea that we settle for so much less sometimes. We settle for that which is meaningless and that which is shallow, for that which is not going to benefit us eternally. And we need to seek that which God calls us to seek for, to seek Him, to love Him. I think one phrase I saw in the book is, it's just as bad to worship the law instead of the lawgiver as it is to worship creation instead of the Creator. Don't just worship the law. Don't just worship the culture of Christianity. You need to worship Christ. This is the call to us. So that's what I've seen this week. I hope that helps you. Thanks for teaching. Thanks for watching the video. I hope it's been helpful to you as you prepare to go through this lesson this week, and share it with your friends. Let them know. Subscribe there on the bottom on YouTube so you'll get a notice every Monday morning when the videos go up. Thanks. We'll see you next week.